Could the Tea Party use any constitutional grounds to justify their existence?
I think that in order to justify their existence, I think that they do have constitutional grounds in the sense that in the First Amendment there is a right to petition, and that in and of itself gives any person, no matter what they want to say, the right to say anything that obviously disregarding hate speech and things like that, but in order to voice their opinions in a public forum.
However, they're often justifying some of their more radical movements through use of the Declaration's statement that when governments cease to protect rights, then people have the right to revolt. However, I would say that they are revolting for transient causes which were not approved in the Declaration as a reason for revolt. And they're also not following Locke's principle that as long as there are means for the problems to be worked out through government, there is no right to revolt.
To conclude that, certainly we believe that the Tea Party has the constitutional right to exist and to voice their opinions. However, we don't feel that they're going about it in a way that furthers productive civil discourse.
Thank you. Can you tell me why you think it's less likely that folks are joining groups and organizations, voluntary organizations, and then why folks are less inclined to vote where it used to be? I mean, except for the previous year, for 18-year-olds, it basically has gone down, trended down. Why do you think that is, and do we really have a vibrant democracy if that's the case?
Well, in the later half of the 20th century, and also in the beginning part of the 21st century, we have seen countless examples of things that have happened in our government that have caused people to have greater mistrust. For example, starting out with things like Watergate, all the way up to more recently with like scandals we've seen. The recent senator soliciting sex in a bathroom. Things like that have just caused Americans to look at our government and say, "What's going on?"
There's also an increase in technology that has radically changed the way Americans live their lives. They are now able to spend 3 or 4 hours in front of the TV instead of having to go out and meet with their communities for entertainment.
Additionally, research has shown that as suburbia has grown and as commute time has increased, the time available for civic participation has decreased. In addition, Americans move more times in their lives, change jobs more, and I think it's a result of people generally feeling less attached to their community.
You talked about the trend for the demand for ever-increasing services on the part of the people toward the government. Would you talk a little bit about what you think would be the appropriate response of government in trying to promote equality of opportunity and equality of condition, if you think that should be promoted?
I think the most, in my opinion, the most important issue that the government needs to look at in furthering equality has to be education. We already have public education in the United States, but as we look through the country through different states or even through different parts of states, public schools have a extreme disparity of how the quality of the education we're getting. I think if the federal government can give either more power to the states or more power to the local governments or even take action themselves to make this more equal, we would see much better results in our citizenry.
I would add that I think healthcare, I personally believe that healthcare is an important step in this. To me, it seems odd that people are expected to be able to enjoy the rights they're given under this government if they're not healthy enough to enjoy them. And I would add that the demand for increasing services from the government is not in and of itself bad. The demand for increasing services is bad when there's no corresponding increase in involvement and no willingness to pay taxes to finance those increased services.
And finally, there's a large responsibility to be placed on parents. There are many studies that show children whose parents discuss politics and current events with them at the dinner table go on to have higher rates of education, they're more likely to vote, and they're more likely to volunteer in their communities.
And government has a responsibility for seeing that parents do those things?
I don't think government has a responsibility. I think the citizens have a responsibility, as they have a responsibility to become educated, to stay up with current events so that they can make an informed decision and participate in a beneficial manner.
I also think in terms of parents, in my opinion, that goes back to education. In the sense that if the parents had a better education, they would value that sense of in this that opportunity in this country, would want to see their children have that same opportunity.
So you're advocating kind of a trickle-down system for seeing that comes to pass?
I wouldn't necessarily use the term trickle-down, but I would say the fact that we need to start somewhere. In my opinion, we need to start with education because that'll give us a better base to work from.
You seem to be very supportive of small groups, of communities, of voluntary kind of things. Tocqueville certainly would be also. He talked about us being a nation of joiners. But on the other hand, we often condemn the people who sit in those tables up there, the 80,000 lobbyists around Washington to represent interest groups. You know, what's your feeling on interest groups? Are they good, bad, or indifferent?
First, we'd like to go back to a distinction we made in our speech. There's a difference between the local environmental club that goes and picks up the park every Sunday, and then a Sierra Club lobbyist who receives a check but never discourses with any of the people who send that check.
Right, and I think that starting in the earliest example I can think of is when in the 1900s, one of the first interest groups we saw that were advocating prohibition. We saw interest groups that are relatively new in this country go in and cause an amendment to happen. I think that power that to happen is extremely, it's extremely powerful, and I think that there is a sense of danger, in my opinion, of interest groups having that much power.
All right, and I think that certainly expressing opinions as an association to lawmaking bodies isn't bad, but the problem becomes when we really fulfill Madison's view of factions, and we have a government that is pulled in various directions by very narrow interests, none of whom are looking out for what we would see as the greater good overall.